I don't like to be negative, but I also don't like to be disappointed. The Engineer Paragon, released as part of the BTD6 32.0 update, is unfortunately disappointing. Of course, Ninja Kiwi worked hard on this, and I don't want to put them down for their effort. But I also think that criticism is important, so that their hard work can go towards a better end product. Even if the current Engineer Paragon isn't very likely to be changed drastically, it's still worth going over everything I have to say for the sake of future Paragon designs. That's why I want to talk about 3 things: what I like about the Engineer Paragon, what I like about Paragons in general, and what I dislike about the Engineer Paragon. Right away, the Engineer Paragon sticks out for being so expensive. It makes sense, since the tier 5s are all very expensive when added up. This is nearly a $1 million tower, and that's just for degree 1. But I love that. It changes up the meta by being more expensive than the Ninja Paragon, and also a satisfying Paragon to build up power for. Engineers can generate money with Balloon Trap, which we know from the Navark counts for quadruple the pops needed to get power. So it's a great setup for a really strong power spike in your defense. I like that a lot. The Master Builder also has an ability that works unlike anything else in the game. The first time you use the ability, it places down a laser sentry that also causes more sentries to spawn in range of the tower. The second time you use the ability, it spawns a sentry that fires anti-balloon projectiles. The third time you use the ability, it places a rocket sentry that fires anti-Moab missiles. Using the ability again will just cycle through the placement of these sentries in the same order. Having control over where you place sentries is really cool, because that was a weakness of the original Engineer. Range buffs could actually be detrimental when relying on sentries for damage, as the Engineer would spread them out more, making the damage zone less focused. This applies to the main 3 sentries only, so that's all I have to say in the form of positives for them. I'm glad that the sentries were represented at all though. That takes me to what I think makes for a good Paragon overall. I think that Paragons should represent the most iconic elements of a tower in a satisfying way. I can't sugarcoat it. Big numbers give me neuron activation. I want my Paragon to be super strong. I want it to be efficient. I want it to compete with the other towers in its class. But I also want it to do justice to the tower it comes from. While having every upgrade from every path would be excessive, there should be something particularly iconic from each of a tower's 3 paths. Not only should these be iconic parts of the original tower, but they should also be significant parts of the Paragon. The Ascended Shadow is a good example of both of these traits. It has 9 stars for its main attack, to represent the many projectiles of the top path ninja, a 50% global slowdown to represent the middle path, and a sticky bomb for the bottom path that deals hundreds of thousands of damage to bosses. Notice that I didn't mention things like Seeking Shurikens or a Flash Bomb. Those are also good to have, but they don't stand out as much as the other characteristics of the Paragon do in my opinion. Sticky Bomb stands out because there's a memorable way to use it. It deals great damage for tier 1 boss events, and you can see how effective it is. Players look at the Sticky Bomb on boss balloons and know that it's about to deal a high amount of damage when it explodes. This is what makes it stand out as an upgrade, and therefore iconic. When the Ascended Shadow uses it, you also see that Sticky Bomb on the boss balloon, and you know that tens if not hundreds of thousands of damage are about to be dealt to it. The same is true for the rest of the Ascended Shadow. Ninja Kiwi chose iconic upgrades from the ninja to be represented by the Paragon, and each representation is a significant part of the Paragon. A lack of these 2 elements is what makes the Master Builder a letdown for me. Sure, the sentries are nice, but they're not executed as well as they can be. I'll explain that more later, but while I'm still giving the benefit of the doubt, I'll also say that the Balloon Trap is understandably difficult to implement. Do you make it capable of trapping bads, or just make it the same as Triple XL Trap? Apparently, neither. There's no trap at all. The bottom path of the Engineer stood out by being a farming tool that could be placed on the track. Not including something as iconic as that is a big letdown. Even if it wouldn't be much stronger than Triple XL Trap, it would at least be nice to carry it over when making the Paragon. To be honest, I think it would be fine to allow the trap to swallow 1 bad per round. Similar to the Navark's hook ability, it would stop being usable on bads after reaching a limit. So every subsequent trap placed that round would be unable to swallow bads. So the following bads would fly over the trap freely. That would be ideal, but instead, the only bottom path representation comes from pin and arguably double guns. I would concede to that if and only if we got the one thing I was looking forward to the most with the Engineer Paragon. That would be the middle path representation. Unfortunately, there's nothing here. This is what pushed me to make this video at all. Paragons have all been unbuffable so far, but they also had no abilities until the Navark was released. So, I had hopes that the Engineer Paragon would break new ground. I wanted nothing more than the ability to overclock Paragons. I don't care if that's hopelessly idealistic. Overclock is by far the most iconic element of the Engineer as a whole. Whether it's 2 million pops challenges, god boosting towers, multiplying farm productivity, or anything else, Overclock is the source of some of the most interesting, satisfying, and fun strategies in the game. If you disagree, that might be because of how used to Overclock you might have gotten. If that's the case, that only speaks more volumes for how iconic Overclock is. Consequently, it speaks for how important it should have been to do Overclock justice for the Master Builder. The top path is the only one of the 3 paths with significant representation, but even then, it still runs into some problems. For one, the laser sentry can't be locked on a target. It has to be aimed with your mouse or finger at all times. I don't think this makes for a good creative decision, it's just a lack of quality of life. Sure, it gives you something to always do with the Paragon, but to always have to do this is a drag. What really sucks though, is how the lesser sentries spawn all over the place. Like I said earlier, more range to spawn sentries randomly could be detrimental because you're spreading out damage when you might not want to do that. The Paragon has such a huge range to spawn sentries in that this is very much a downside. The explosive AoE when the sentries expire is way less effective when they spawn in all sorts of corners and other out of the way spots all over the map instead of near the track. Since you can't buff the Paragon, the Sentry Champion is way more satisfying to use. It doesn't run into the problem of sentries spawning all over the place if you plan your upgrades accordingly either. In pretty much all regards, it's a better Paragon than the Master Builder. In fact, I'm going to call the literal Paragon the Sentry Champion. That name is more fitting for a tower that puts all its focus on sentries. The top path tier 5 Engineer actually stacks really well with Overclock and Ultra Boost, and functions better for easily dealing damage. This is what's more worthy of the name Sentry Paragon. Call the Master Builder the Sentry Champion, and the 5XX Engineer the Sentry Paragon. I hope that name isn't too harsh on Ninja Kiwi's efforts. The work they put into it is clearly passionate, and I don't mean to mock that aspect of the Paragon. Part of me hopes that they can dedicate that passion to making the Master Builder into the representation of the Engineer that tower deserves in future updates. Even if not, I hope those 2 rules about iconic and significant representation will stick when designing future Paragons. That to me is more important than making a bunch of big price and damage numbers. If you want to hear my theories and ideas for future Paragon designs, stick around, because I might make a series doing this for every tower that hasn't yet gotten a Paragon. Now that I've deconstructed the Engineer Paragon, the next thing I can do is let my imagination soar thinking about the Ace Paragon. I'll see myself out.